Hello and welcome to High House, live from London Climate Action Week. Today we're talking about the slow death of traditional media and the rise of climate creators. Joining me to talk about that is Simon Clark, YouTuber, author, science communicator, and a man with 750,000 people following his channel, which is designed to demystify climate change. Simon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a genuine pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, Simon, I think to kick things off, we're going to show the audience a couple of stats. They're from the Reuters Institute Digital News report. Came out last week, landmark report that looks at countries all over the world and their news consumptions. If we look at those stats, the headline was that it's the year now, finally, where social media and video channels have overtaken traditional news outlets as the largest source of news. You've got 54% of people using social media and video platforms to get news. Traditional outlets, the highest they could manage was 51 from their websites and their apps, print way below that. Why do you think that might be?
I think the way that we interact with information now, compared to, say, when I was growing up, let's say 25 years ago, is completely different, because the way that we interact with information now is through apps. For one thing, that wasn't a thing at all 25 years ago, that we have in our pockets that we use to both create and consume information. Yeah. We will shoot video and take photos and send it to people on WhatsApp and receive that same information. You might have your own YouTube channel, your own Instagram page in particular, and will consume news through that page. And so I think we have normalized this idea of consuming media from other individuals. There's actually a parallel here, I think, with sort of power systems. 25 years ago, people were designing power systems with large power plants that were built close to population centres, and you turn them off and on again, and that was fine if all you had access to was coal, basically. But now we have this distributed power network. We have lots of smaller forms of generation, solar and wind and hydro, that's much more complex, and it means that you can route stuff to smaller communities, but it's much more difficult to balance. And I think something similar has happened in the information ecosystem, where we've moved from this model of these large monolithic institutions like the BBC or CBC or whoever, and print media especially, and towards this more distributed network, which is interesting in a couple of ways. For one thing, a lot of the information that people will get from those networks is actually originally from those traditional news outlets, which I think is a good thing. Yeah, and a really important point as well. Some of this might well be people getting traditional journalism just from social media. Yeah, because at the end of the day, journalism is a skill. It is something that you have to study, and you have to learn ethically how to do it. You have to know how to be rigorous with doing it. There are journalist YouTubers. Coffeezilla is probably the most famous example of that, doing their own investigations. But certainly for me, when I'm reporting on climate change, I'm echoing and trying to amplify and provide context to analysis from people at Carbon Brief, The Guardian, individual scientists like Catherine Hayhill or Zeke Housefather. But what I can do as a science communicator is try and tell a story with the facts that they have uncovered, and then try to make it personal. And I think that's the other key thing that we've seen with the rise of social media, is that it's a much more personal way of consuming news, because it can be tailored to you specifically. It can be a form of media that's specifically for people aged 25 who are male, interested in football, for example. And that's the way that there's a creator that does that, and that's how you get your news, because you feel that connection to that person in a way that you simply don't to the Times or the Daily Mail or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of things going on, and I think it reflects changing technologies and primarily the way that we use those technologies and perceive information. So I guess moving on from the report and kind of those headline figures, I mean, you cover climate. Why is climate different to other subjects? What's different about the climate? Because it was, again, something that came up in that Reuters report, is the dissatisfaction that people have in the way that climate is covered. The people who said that it was covered badly in the media far outweighed the people who said it was covered well. So there is obviously something out there that people don't like the way that traditional sources are giving people climate information. Yeah, I think a large part, I'm going to put my Noam Chomsky hat on here. I think a large part of this is that when people think of traditional media outlets, we're talking about large companies that operate primarily via advertising. And an advertising model inherently prioritizes the status quo, because they will sell adverts to high-income consumers, and overwhelmingly the status quo benefits the way that we currently operate, by definition, meaning fossil fuel interests, meaning large agricultural companies. And so there is an interest in those traditional media forms powered by advertising, and this still applies to a bunch of stuff when it comes to new media, to perpetuate those systems. And it means that misinformation around climate is very well funded, and it's supported by the design of these platforms. So I think that's a part of it, and I think people are increasingly aware that traditional news media, especially print media, is very partisan, and in many cases is very blatantly owned by a person who has vested interest in the fossil fuel industry. I'm thinking places like Fox News, for example, or many right-wing outlets in the UK. And I think people are clued into that fact and are dissatisfied by the fact that you're not giving me the facts here.
And I guess on the other side, though, online things are driven by algorithms which support a certain type of messaging. I mean, you're a creator. As a creator, when you're putting things to air, when you're putting things out there, how much do you have to think about that? And how do you balance what algorithms reward, which is sometimes the sensational, sometimes the very simple, with what you're trying to do, which is share proper climate information, which is an incredibly complex subject for ordinary people to get their heads around?
Yes, I mean, I do think that the thing when it comes to covering climate is that complexity is the right word. You interface with so much science, but also economics, politics, ecology, chemistry, space science. There's so many different things that are all going on. And when I'm designing a video, the way that I used to approach it from my scientist background is you would basically write the video, say, well, this is what it's about, and then you'd think, okay, well, what are we going to title it? What's the right title? In the way that you would put a title on a paper. And unfortunately, that does not work. What you have to do as a creator is start with your title and your thumbnail, and then you provide the audience member with a value proposition. You say, if you watch this video, this is what you're going to come away with. In my opinion, a good video is never about what it says it's about. That might be a part of it, and as long as you deliver on that value that you're offering in, say, the first 30 seconds, or indicate that you will, then you can really take your audience on a journey. And when I do content that's 20 or 30 minutes long, we try to do really complex topics and provide nuance. But if you put that on the packaging, it's never going to convince people. You have to hook people in with a simple value proposition, communicated. I work with a great guy called Taha Khan, who's constantly trying to get me to simplify the thumbnail down. It's like strip away elements. How simple can you make the idea? The simpler it is, the better. Because as you say, algorithms prioritize simplicity. And I think this is one of the reasons why we've struggled in the messaging with climate change, and why climate misinformation is so prevalent, is partly because the people trying to counter climate action are offering very simplistic narratives. Here in the UK, it's, for example, we're going to get rid of net zero and it's going to pay for everything in the country. And that's a really simple idea for Reform UK to put out there into the world, when the reality is much more complex. But complexity doesn't play well in algorithms.
So let's do the audience a favour. What we've done for our thumbnail on this one is we said why you are watching climate content on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
It's got a picture of your face on it, so let's tell people.
Well, you can start with a much more attractive person than me. That's a rookie error.
But why? Why are people watching it on YouTube?
So people are watching it on YouTube because people are watching everything on YouTube. It is. I think it might be the single largest source of information on the planet, really. So when it comes to search engines, it's the second most popular search engine, just behind Google. So people are watching climate stuff because they go to YouTube for information, full stop. They are also going to YouTube now because a lot of money has been ploughed into more traditional outlets to put their stuff on YouTube, because they know that's where eyes are. And there are some professional creators. I mean, I'll shout out some people who are excellent creators. You've got Climate Town, you've got Dr. Ella Gilbert, you've got Dave Borlas at Just Have a Think, you've got Climate Adam, you've got me, to put thoroughly down the list. There is now a more established ecosystem where people know they can go to YouTube and watch something of quality when it comes to climate. So it's a mixture of changing viewing habits in the general audience, and I think in this particular niche we are starting to see some specialization, and we're starting to see scientists, because most of those people I just mentioned are academics or ex-academics, who have basically learned how to do this, partly because YouTube's 20 years old now, and people have started to grow up with YouTube as a technology, as a way of communicating information. It's meant just naturally that for example, just as cinema matured, 20 or 30 years after the development of cinema, you started seeing filmmakers who grew up with it and took the platform to new heights. And you're kind of seeing the same thing with YouTube now. It's that mature as a platform.
Yeah. Picking up on what you said earlier about disinformation online, talking about anti-net zero people, Reform, who are a right-wing party here in the UK for our global audience who might not know them. I was a BBC journalist for a lot of years, so I feel I've got to ask you from the other side of the divide. You could also make the argument, could you not, that there are people who make quite a lot of headway from climate alarmism?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think I personally take a lot of dissatisfaction from seeing climate creators lean into that, because you've already used the word sensationalism. People will click on heightened emotions. At the end of the day, a good story is a story that is one that makes you feel something. Yeah. And the stronger the emotion, in a way, the better the story. And we know that negative emotions perform better when it comes to social media algorithms. We actually did a test of this. We covered the IEA's energy report last year, where we took exactly the same conclusions, and we did a video that was saying great news from the IEA and bad news from the IEA. Yeah. And the bad one outperformed on TikTok and Instagram. YouTube, interestingly, the good one actually had an algorithmic intervention where it had a sudden bump in views about 24 hours in, which indicates that A, psychologically and in terms of algorithm design, these negative framings do perform better. But B, algorithm design matters, because I think that what happened with the YouTuber, because those two videos were doing almost identically, they were released at the same time, they had something like 50,000 views, but the good one had a bump. And I think that reflects algorithmic design to prioritize that content. I think when it comes to, in general, regulating the climate space online, we need to really interrogate the design of those algorithms. We need to interrogate recommendation algorithms on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all these major platforms, because they effectively shape the lens through which we view the world. It's not just climate, it's absolutely everything. And we've effectively entrusted the design of that lens to a handful of companies that we have no oversight on. Yeah. Personally, I think that's one of the greatest challenges we have in climate communication is basically trying to take back control of the way that we interact with information, the way that we perceive the world. And I think part of that does need to be is trying to rein in people using alarmist headlines, because there's an awful lot in climate change to be scared of. There absolutely is. But there's also an awful lot of progress that has been made. And I'm firmly of the opinion that nobody's going to sign on to support a losing team. Yeah. If you only talk about the negative headlines, and if that's the only thing that you see being algorithmically supported, you're never going to get people on board, because people think it's hopeless. And that is exactly what the vested interests in the fossil fuel industry want you to do. They want you to think there's no point in trying to take climate action. And so, that they're actively trying to support this kind of doomerism. And we saw from the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, I think it was 2 years ago now, they published a report that basically said the same channels that previously hawked outright climate denial and saying that climate change wasn't real have now pivoted to the solutions don't work, we're never going to make a difference, it's too late. And it's this new form of denial that's emerged, but it serves exactly the same purpose.
Talking about algorithms and handing over power of the narrative, power of the story to the machines. Let's talk about AI, because we focused a lot on the rise of YouTube, the rise of social media, how traditional sources, print, have collapsed along with broadcast. In a way, that's the story of the last 20 years. If we look 20 years into the future, you've got to think about AI and the power of AI already. I mean, you talked about YouTube as a search engine. I mean, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini are becoming enormously powerful in that space. How do you think that impacts your work as a creator specifically, but also more generally how people get their information?
Yeah, it's a fascinating field that I wish wasn't quite so consequential. It's one of these things that I find very interesting from a scientific perspective. I think what we're already seeing as creators is the rise of slop content. We are seeing channels that are entirely generated by AI, and that are becoming almost indistinguishable. I mean, the fact that some people are saying, "Oh, I'm not seeing AI-generated content in my feed," means that it is there. They just don't know that it's AI-generated.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah.
And you know, and this is across all sectors. I know that this is a massive problem when it comes to kids' content. You know, there was a scandal a couple of years ago with I think it was ElsaGate. It was called, with AI-generated Disney stuff that would have incredibly inappropriate things in it, because some parents will put the TV on and not watch what their child is watching, and then suddenly there'll be a scream because somebody generated a video without thinking about the consequences of it. And that's fundamentally why people are doing this. They're using AI tools to try and generate revenue without thinking about the consequences. As a creator, I don't think that we are going to be able to stop purely AI-generated content, because it is so simple to make, and there's always people out there who are trying to make a quick buck, basically. I don't think you're ever going to get past that. I think the best that we can do is try to make sure that the tools do not promote misinformation that can only be used responsibly, and have guardrails built into them to basically prevent that kind of use, because we apparently cannot rely on human decency for that to happen. I do think that there is still very much a future for human creators. The analogy that I have is I could buy a loaf of bread from Tesco for like 75p, and it would be made in a machine, and it will be fine. But I could also go to a bakery on a street corner and buy the same loaf that might be 4 or 5 times more expensive. But it will taste better, and I will know that it's supporting a person who made it with craft, basically. And we've had sliced bread for 100 years now, and bakeries still exist. I very much see in the future that we will have human creators, because people will value that craft and value the quality that, especially in a field like climate communication, somebody with an academic background can provide, and can give that the scientific context. And when it comes to AI and climate content specifically, we did a video about this last year. There's a very worrying trend of climate skeptic organizations pumping out AI-generated misinformation and hosting it online. There was a website we investigated called Climate Cosmos that did this, where the business model was the same thing. You know, you just pump stuff up online, you put advertising on it, and bring in revenue without giving a care about what the social implications might be. But the effect of this is you're then creating so much data that will be scraped to train the next generation of AI models, and it's something that's called LLM grooming when done deliberately, or slop-on-slop training, because we're running out of new content that's human-made to train the new models on. We've already used most of it. And so there's this very real risk that next-generation tools will be trained on content created by climate skeptics, and that's going to make those tools lean away from scientific consensus, and frankly, lean away from being useful. And that's something I'm very, very worried about. And I think, again, we need much more oversight when it comes to the companies building these tools. I think certain companies like Anthropic are doing manual flagging of information by experts, but that's an outlier. It's certainly not the industry standard. And I think, just as with algorithm design, with AI-generated tools, we need to have much more oversight.
Well, look, on that topic of oversight, we've got one more asset which the team are going to throw up now. It's from this morning's Press Gazette. It's reporting that in the UK, publishers may get priority on YouTube and social. By publishers, they mean traditional publishers, news outlets. Now, this is not regulation. It's something the government want platforms to do, and they're going to have a conversation with them to encourage it. How does that make you feel? Do you get squeezed out as an original lone man content creator? You know?
I mean, there's 2 things, I think. Firstly, as I sort of said earlier, certainly speaking for myself, when I'm talking about a paper that's come out or whatever it is, I will primarily learn about that either from a newsletter from an established organization, or news coverage from a specialist newsroom. Carbon Brief is sort of the industry standard for it. So I am a second-hand telling, hopefully with provided context and hopefully making it more palatable to a general audience, from that original source. And so in that sense, I absolutely am okay with that original source being higher up. It's almost like, I want you to read this report and then come to me to get the surrounding lay of the land around it. So in that sense, I think it's good. I think the second thing is that this is a suggestion that could be good or could be bad, depending on who is deciding what a trustworthy organization is. Because if you are blanket saying these organizations are good and these organizations are bad, that does not reflect the nuance of how they might cover specific topics. So, you know, the BBC is probably a good example, actually, of someone that is pretty uniformly regarded across the board as being good, but there might be variability in terms of how appropriate experts would say specific coverage might be on their particular field. I think there are organisations out there that rate the factual accuracy of newsrooms. Ground News is an organisation that draws from multiple fact-checking organisations and basically says, right, the trustworthy sources are saying this is what the partisan sources are saying. Those organisations exist, and if they are consulted on this and said, and can say to the government, right, these are the people that we think you are factually accurate when it comes to this issue, that's great. But I can't help but be concerned about any it's almost like gatekeeping to the audience. It's any organisation that will basically say, yes, you, not you. You don't get to speak to the public about this. There is a level when it comes to climate that I think that is a responsible thing to do if you have the right person making those calls.
Yeah, well, let me ask you as a final question then. It's sort of about that relationship with the government and also other big institutions, because obviously large media organisations, they're very well established, they've got relationships that go back decades, there are large press teams, they've got lobbying companies who they employ, there's a really entrenched relationship there. When you're coming at it as a newcomer and you're not a newsroom of hundreds of people, what is your relationship there? How does that work?
So we've seen something interesting in the past couple of years where I think organisations have clued into the fact that creators are where people are getting their news from. So last year I did a thing with the Prime Minister's office and went to Downing Street, filmed some content with soon-to-be ex-Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, along with other ministers, including Ed Miliband. And that was a direct reflection of, hey, we've seen what you're doing in the space. We would like you to meet these people. Would you be interested in making this content? And it was a great opportunity, so I said yes. That's something that we certainly didn't see 5 years ago. I think we kind of started to see a breakthrough into the mainstream in certain areas. Some institutions are getting it, some aren't. I would love to see institutions like, for example, the Natural History Museum having like a creative residency program where they take a YouTuber who makes content in the space and is a proven storyteller and proven as a reliable source of information to say, hey, we'll give you funding for 6 months, make content about stuff in the museum. Do that with art galleries or museums or scientific institutions. I would love it if the Crick in London hired somebody who makes genetics content. With climate specifically, you could have a creator in residence at the Met Office. We're not really seeing that yet in a way that I think, which to me I should say is like my pitch for the alternative to the traditional news media model, because as a one-person band or a small team, you're not going to be able to match the output of these organisations. So the workflow is going to be different. But I do think we're starting to see us being invited to the press events more. I think that that's going in the right direction, but I would like to see more of that new way of interacting with creators going forwards. And if anybody's watching, I don't know which one my camera is, probably that one. If anybody's watching, I would encourage you as an institution to do that. Reach out to creators in your space, because as a creator, I am desperate, really, to hear from these institutions who would say, hey, do you want to come and make a video? And the answer is almost always, absolutely, I do. I love you guys. I think it would benefit everybody, basically.
Right. Well, look, on that note, we've run out of time. Simon, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for letting me prattle on for a bit.
Yeah, great. And most importantly as well, thank you very much to all the audience watching. This has been High House live from London Climate Action Week.